The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Miller's gun shop as Sarah Chun pulled her beat-up Honda Civic into a space near the front entrance. She sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel and taking deep breaths. Through the large windows, she could see several men inside examining rifles and chatting with the store employees. Her stomach churned with nervous energy. Sarah had been putting off this visit for 3 weeks now. Ever since the incident at the university where she worked as a marine biology professor, she knew she needed to take her personal security seriously. The threatening emails had started after she published her research on illegal fishing operations in protected waters. What began as anonymous hate mail had escalated to someone following her home from work twice last week. The campus security chief had been the one to suggest she consider getting a concealed carry permit. Professor Chun, he had said during their meeting, these people you're exposing don't play around. They've got millions of dollars at stake. You need to be able to protect yourself. Sarah had grown up in a household where guns were never discussed, let alone owned. Her parents, both doctors who had immigrated from Taiwan, believed that education and hard work were the only weapons anyone ever needed. But now, at 32 years old, she was beginning to understand that the world was more dangerous than her sheltered academic life had prepared her for. She gathered her courage and stepped out of the car. The bell above the door chimed as she entered Miller's gun shop. The smell of gun oil and leather holsters filled her nostrils. Behind the glass counter, dozens of handguns were displayed in neat rows. Hunting rifles lined the walls, and camouflage clothing hung from racks throughout the store. 3 men were clustered around the main counter, examining a large hunting rifle. They looked like they had stepped out of a hunting magazine, beards, flannel shirts, and boots that had seen plenty of outdoor action. Behind the counter stood Jake Miller, the store owner, a heavy-set man in his 50s with graying hair and arms covered in military tattoos. Now, this here is what you want for elk hunting, Jake was saying as he handed the rifle to one of the customers. She'll drop anything you point her at, guaranteed. Sarah waited patiently near the handgun counter, trying not to look out of place. She was wearing her usual work attire, dark slacks, a blue button-down shirt, and sensible flats. Her long black hair was pulled back in a professional ponytail, and she carried a small leather purse. After what felt like an eternity, Jake noticed her standing there. "Help you with something, miss?" he asked, his tone suggesting he thought she might be lost. "Yes, I'm interested in purchasing a handgun for personal protection," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady and confident. The conversation at the hunting rifle counter stopped abruptly. All 4 men turned to look at her, and she could feel their eyes sizing her up. One of the customers, a tall man with a thick beard, actually chuckled. "You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart?" the bearded man said. "The flower shop is 3 doors down." His 2 friends laughed along with him. Sarah felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment, but she held her ground. "I'm quite sure I'm in the right place," she replied firmly. Jake set down the hunting rifle and walked over to her section of the counter, shaking his head slightly. "Look, lady, I don't know what you've been watching on TV, but owning a gun isn't like buying a purse. These things are serious business." "I understand that completely," Sarah said. "That's why I'm here to learn and make an informed decision." The bearded customer wasn't finished with his commentary. "Listen, honey, these aren't fashion accessories. You need upper body strength, training, and nerves of steel. No offense, but you look like you'd faint at the first loud noise." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. She had dealt with condescending colleagues in academia for years, and this wasn't much different. "I appreciate your concern," she said coolly, "but I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions about my personal safety." Jake sighed and pulled out a small revolver from the case. "Well, if you insist on going through with this little .38 special is about as basic as they come. Point and shoot. Even has a pink grip available if you want something more feminine." The men at the counter erupted in laughter again. "Pink grip," one of them wheezed. "That's perfect. Match your nail polish." Sarah looked down at the small revolver Jake had placed on the counter. She had done enough research online to know that he was essentially offering her the gun equivalent of training wheels, something designed more for show than for serious self-defense. Actually, she said, I was thinking more along the lines of Glock 19 or perhaps a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield, something with a good track record for reliability and accuracy. The laughter stopped. Jake raised his eyebrows, clearly surprised that she knew specific model names and had done her homework. But his expression quickly returned to one of skepticism. Those are serious pistols, he said. The Glock 19 has got some real kick to it. You sure you can handle that kind of recoil? I'd like to find out, Sarah replied. Could I see one, please? Jake reluctantly pulled out a Glock 19 from the case. As he placed it on the counter, the bearded customer leaned over to get a better look. Now, that's a real gun, he said approvingly, then looked at Sarah with amusement. But it's going to knock you flat on your back, little lady. This isn't some toy from the movies. Sarah picked up the Glock, surprised by its weight, but pleased with how it felt in her hands. She had watched dozens of instructional videos online and had even visited a shooting range once to get a feel for different firearms. The grip felt natural, and the balance was exactly what she had expected. The trigger pull is about 5.5 pounds, she said, checking the action with proper safety protocols. Magazine capacity is 15 rounds plus one in the chamber. It's striker-fired with built-in safety mechanisms. Now all four men were staring at her with genuine surprise. Jake recovered first, though his tone remained condescending. Well, looks like someone's been doing their homework, he said. But knowing facts and actually shooting are two completely different things. Have you ever even fired a gun before? Once, Sarah admitted honestly. At a range in the next county. I put 30 rounds through a rental Glock 17 to get a feel for the platform. The bearded customer snorted with derision. 30 rounds? That's adorable. I go through more ammo than that just warming up. You think that makes you some kind of marksman? His friend joined in the mockery. My 8-year-old nephew has more trigger time than that. This is ridiculous. Sarah set the Glock down carefully, making sure it was pointed in a safe direction. I'm not claiming to be an expert, she said calmly. That's exactly why I'm here, to learn and to practice. Everyone has to start somewhere. Yeah, but most people start with something appropriate for their skill level, Jake said, tapping the small revolver. This .38 is perfect for beginners, especially... He paused, clearly searching for a diplomatic way to phrase his thoughts. Especially women. Sarah finished for him. Especially people without experience, Jake corrected, though his tone suggested that was exactly what he had meant. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the door chime. Sarah glanced over to see another customer entering the store, but the men at the counter were too focused on their discussion to pay attention. Look, the bearded customer said, clearly enjoying himself. I've been shooting since I was 12 years old. I've been hunting, done some competition shooting, even took a few tactical courses. And I'm telling you, that Glock is way more gun than you can handle. How can you possibly know what I can or cannot handle? Sarah asked, her patience finally wearing thin. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, he replied smugly. I can tell by looking at you that you've never been in a real high-stress situation. When push comes to shove, you'd probably drop the gun and run crying. Sarah felt her anger rising. She forced herself to remain calm. She had faced down aggressive fishing boat captains who were twice her size and angry about her environmental research. She had testified before congressional committees and had her work questioned by hostile lawyers representing fishing industry interests. She was tougher than these men assumed. You might be surprised, she said quietly. The new customer had been browsing quietly near the rifle section, but now he approached the main counter. He was an older man, probably in his 60s, with silver hair and an athletic build that suggested he kept himself in excellent shape despite his age. He wore simple civilian clothes, jeans, a polo shirt, and running shoes, but something about his bearing suggested military experience. Excuse me, the man said politely, but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. Jake looked over at the newcomer. Just helping this young lady understand the realities of gun ownership, he said. Some people watch too many action movies and think they know what they're doing. The older man nodded thoughtfully, then looked at Sarah. And what specifically are you looking for in terms of personal protection? Sarah was grateful for what seemed like the first reasonable question anyone had asked her. I need something reliable and accurate for concealed carry, she explained. I've been receiving threats related to my work, and I want to be able to defend myself if necessary. What kind of work do you do? The man asked with genuine interest. I'm a marine biology professor. I've been researching illegal fishing operations, and some people don't appreciate the attention. The older man's expression grew more serious. That can definitely put you in harm's way. These criminal organizations don't hesitate to use intimidation and violence. Finally, someone who understood the reality of her situation. Sarah felt a wave of relief that she wasn't being dismissed or patronized. Exactly, she said. I'm not interested in this as a hobby or for sport. I need practical protection. The bearded customer rolled his eyes. Oh, so now she's some kind of undercover investigator? Come on, lady, just buy the .38 and call it a day. The older man turned to look at the bearded customer with an expression that made the larger man take an involuntary step backward. There was something in his eyes, a quiet authority that suggested he wasn't someone to be trifled with. I think, the older man said calmly, that the young lady is perfectly capable of making her own decisions about what level of firepower she needs for her personal protection. The bearded customer started to argue, but something about the older man's demeanor made him think better of it. Instead, he muttered something under his breath about political correctness and women who didn't know their place. Sarah looked at the older man with gratitude. Thank you, she said. I appreciate someone actually listening to what I need instead of deciding for me what I'm capable of. What's your background with firearms? The man asked. Limited, Sarah admitted. I've done a lot of research, and I spent one afternoon at a range getting familiar with basic operations and safety. I know I need proper training, and I'm planning to take a concealed carry course and practice regularly. The older man nodded approvingly. That's exactly the right approach. Too many people buy guns without committing to proper training. Jake had been listening to this exchange with growing irritation. He clearly didn't appreciate having his expertise questioned by a customer, especially in front of other customers. Look, Jake said, I've been selling guns for 25 years. I know what works and what doesn't. And I'm telling you, putting a full-size service pistol in the hands of someone with one afternoon of range time is irresponsible. The older man turned his attention to Jake, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of customers over the years. But have you ever considered that maybe your assumptions about someone's capabilities might be wrong? My assumptions are based on experience, Jake replied defensively. So are mine, the older man said quietly. There was something in his tone that made everyone pay attention. Sarah sensed that this man had more experience with firearms and dangerous situations than anyone else in the store, including Jake. The older man looked at Sarah again. Have you given any thought to what specific features you want to carry a gun? Size, weight, ease of concealment. Sarah appreciated the technical discussion. I've considered the trade-offs between a compact like the Glock 19 and a subcompact like the Glock 26. The 19 gives me better accuracy and capacity, but the 26 would be easier to conceal. That's good thinking, the man said. What about your clothing? Do you typically dress professionally for work? Yes, business casual mostly. Slacks, blouses, sometimes blazers or jackets.